Good evening, Transpac Race fans. I'm Dobbs Davis, here for the 15 July analysis of the 49th Transpac. I'm here with Bill Lee and Ryan Breymaier. It's a real pleasure to have you guys. And today we're going to have a kind of a free-ranging discussion, since I have all this expertise with me in ocean racing and Transpac history, to talk about a few topics. But as usual, we start off here on the tracker view. And what I wanted to try to do, if I could, is, first of all, let me move that thing out. Well, maybe you all can see that. That's our recording. I wanted to go back in time a little bit and just show, for our audience and for Bill and Ryan, where things ended up, and kind of scroll back and see how this looks. And Bill, you've done quite a few Transpacs. I mean, what do you think of this scenario? Here we had three distinct groups of boats and the three different starting days. Everybody kind of starting off on that classic S-curve.
Oh, that's correct. And from there was quite a bit of divergence, either continuing more south or staying at the northern end of the traditional S-curve.
Well, and I wanted to ask Ryan, since he's been involved with offshore multi-hulls, most recently in the context of this race with Lending Club. Both Lending Clubs, right? Or Tritium before that.
Yeah, Tritium and Lending.
And he's certainly an expert, or one of the top English-speaking experts on offshore multi-hull sailing. And I was curious at why this little race that was going on down here between the two Mod 70s and then the guy who ended up coming out in front, the Mighty Merlot, the Orma 60. Why is it that they dove so far off a rumline? I mean, do you have any insight on that?
I'll be honest. I think that they were all driven south more through pack mentality than anything else, because it didn't seem to me in the very beginning that if I had had a multi-hull, I would have done anything other than point at the mark and go. But because they felt that they had a pretty serious competition on their hands, they all kind of stayed together. And one thing about a multi-hull which is nice and that maybe traps you a little bit is that when you put the bow down, you go so much faster that all of a sudden you feel like you're going to get there a lot quicker. And they might have gotten trapped a little bit by that insofar as, you put the bow down, you're doing 30 knots, and you think you're going to get around this big S-curve, and in fact, you're just sailing a lot of distance just like everyone else. You're just doing a bit quicker than a normal boat. And then I think that that's kind of borne out. Where you are right there is pretty obvious. And then if you advance it in time a little bit, you see that they started jibing immediately. They were a long, long way away from Hawaii still when they started to make all these jibes. Another thing is the high wasn't firmly established, and so the weather scenario was a bit funky in the beginning. And I think that they got themselves caught in a little sort of localized ridge or something like that, where they had to work their way through it dead downwind. Whereas all the boats behind, it doesn't look like it on the tracker so easily, but I think everyone else was fairly far behind that weather phenomenon, and those guys just had to eat it. I spoke to the guys on Merlot, and they said that on that middle day they were only doing 18 knots, which for that boat, is going pretty slowly. And so, I think you also can see Maserati's track down the very far southern track. They spent a lot of time jibing and going south, and I think that for a long time the European model showed trade winds being very strong in the south, where the reality was probably not nearly as strong as it was made out to be.
Bill, you were sailing Merlin, your own boat, and
Yes.
navigating that. What was your strategy then at this stage of the race? I'll see if I can find you on the Merlin. Let's see if we can use this, and I believe that will find you in the pack. There you go. So you almost were one of the most northern boats in your pack.
We didn't see a reason to go real south.
Mm-hmm.
So when we redid the boat, we have about 30% more stability than we had when it was new, and we could kind of go where we wanted, and we were stiff enough that we could stay up if we wanted.
Right.
And back us up a little bit, we were down to a reef main and a number 4 jib, but going just fine and staying fairly high on the track.
And in contrast, Ryan, this year you were sailing
Yeah.
on John Sangmeister's OEX, and you said an OEX with a
it's the
lack
pink
of
one.
stability. You got
here.
no. Where are you?
The pink here.
In the
bottom.
pink. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, OEX.
Yeah, so we had exactly the opposite. Merlin's got quite a nice keel with plenty of stability now, whereas we have been working on optimizing the boat for the moderate downwind conditions that you'd expect in the second half of this race, and the boat is extremely quick in those conditions, but we haven't had enough time to sail it due to other projects and everything else happening, within the OEX family, and so we didn't actually have sails that were small enough to be able to stay high enough as the other sleds did. Our smallest sails were big enough that we had to bear away more than we would have liked to get along here. So we figured at that stage that we would try to get to the running conditions quicker by being more south and getting into the trades quicker, and by then we would be able to use our advantage of having a lighter keel and a very fine keel fin to get us downwind at a good rate. Well,
and at this snapshot, Bill, the Speedo says you guys were going 13.4 knots, and the Sangmeister team on OEX was going just a little slower, about the same speed. But look at the difference in distance.
Yeah, this is after we kind of ended up going south. Back almost halfway to the land, we made a decision to get a bit further apart. There you go. You can see there. It's at this point where everyone starts to split in the fleet. This brown boat is Weddell, which is the Grand Mistral 80. They're sailing a different race course than everyone else. But all the sleds, we're all pretty consolidated there with us in the most southern position already. And you can see that we made a pretty significant dive away from the fleet with a much, we were already sailing with a jib top then. We'd gone away from the fore and the reef because we were super slow with that sail combination, and so we put up a bigger sail and tried to get away to the south a little bit, try to create some leverage for later on in the race.
Right. Well, going back forward now, so first half of the race, people set up. The boat illuminated here is still Merlin, so I'm kind of using you, Bill, as a benchmark. And with the changes in Merlin, having more stability and being able to put the pedal down, and I think you said almost any direction you want to, right?
Yeah, the boat's as the kind of boat goes, it's more of a normal boat now, whereas before we were horrible upwind and close reaching. We pretty much sail more like the other sleds.
And you guys also sailed very close to the rum line. You sailed very little distance compared to a lot of the other boats in the fleet. It seems to be, I find that to be extremely important in general to try to minimize your distance sailed, especially on a race like this where there's a lot of uncertainty in the weather. It really oftentimes doesn't pay to get that far away from the rum line.
I think the uncertainty in the weather was valid. And even more important, later in the race, when you didn't know where the holes were going to be, but they started to turn up more and more, and you think there's going to be wind here. Well, you get there, there's not. And we saw a lot of that this year. Yeah. And that argues for the shortest distance between 2 points.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this.
Yeah, look at
it. You're nailed to the rum line there, and then you got headed a little bit or maybe lifted a bit, and then in your final approach made that jibe in at Molokai.
Right, and clear back before we made that jibe, it wasn't the favored jibe was to keep going.
You're pointing at the
jibe. And when we jibed, it was sea conditions or something, but the boat wouldn't go good.
It was sea conditions. We had the same thing. And all of the models showed that the breeze close to the islands would be close to 90 degrees true wind direction. And in fact, for the most part, during that last 2 days, the wind stubbornly stayed, it was shifty, and so it was between 55 and 70 most of the time, which definitely favored staying on starboard. Any kind of port jibe sailing, one, because of the wave state, and two, because of the not so veered wind was very difficult and pretty costly.
Yeah, you spent an awful lot of time waiting for that wind to veer.
Like it never did.
And then the other thing that's interesting about this race, of course, this is one of the, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, this race has had more elapsed time records than any race that, I don't know, throughout the history of the event, or because we've got elapsed time record for the multi-hulls, we've got elapsed time record for the monohulls, we've got all. I think it was Chris Hemmons saying for the under 50. There's a trophy here somewhere. We're by the way, folks, we're sitting in the room that's stacked full of all the trophies that are going to be awarded next Friday. But there is a trophy for the fastest boat under 50 feet, I believe.
The fastest racer cruiser under 50 feet.
Ah, fastest racer cruiser. Okay, well,
it's always hard to figure out what a racer cruiser is.
Okay, well, I'll let you argue with Chris on whether his Rogers 46 is a racer cruiser. But this morning he was saying, yeah, this was a fastest run for a boat of that size and those parameters.
Mm-hmm.
So very fast race for the guys that were up front. But and then in corrected time, this is also coming about where it seemed like the rich got richer. So there was something going on from basically, where's OEX? So OEX was sort of in the back of that wave, maybe.
In the end, yeah.
Absolutely. In the end, but some of these guys back here, just didn't get the same pressure. Grand Illusion, I think, was struggling a bit.
Grand Illusion struggled badly because they were very close with Catapult and Pyewacket for a long time. And then Catapult and Pyewacket and perhaps Runaway just managed. It must have been a 10-mile difference in where they were, and Grand Illusion stopped all of a sudden, and the other guys kept going. And it's not because of the boat. It's a very quick boat. It's just there was a little hole in the weather, and once the wind went away for those guys, it didn't come back.
Right.
And so it was interesting to see that because we were not in the same spot they were, and we were trying very hard, but we couldn't really get going a whole lot better than they did.
Now let's back up a little bit about the confusion over the trophy for the first 50-footer to finish.
Okay.
And we didn't hear it right either. And we said, oh, first 50-footer to finish, hey, let's design a rule around that.
Right.
And so 7 of us created the original Transpac 52 rule.
Yeah.
We did the whole thing over email. It was Bruce Nelson, one of the guys from the Reichel Pew office, Alan, myself, a couple Transpac board members. And then we got halfway there on a 50-footer, and somebody said, hey, you dummies, go look at Pendragon 5. It's already done for you. Just draw a box around Pendragon 5 and you're done. And so that's what we did. And that became the original Transpac 52 rule. 5 boats, I think, in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then the IMS group on the Med, racing the Audi Med Club, they just got madder and madder at the IMS because it wasn't doing it for them. Mm-hmm. And a couple guys say, hey, look at this. Here's a box rule. It's already done. And they adopted it and just did gangbusters with it.
Well, so...
And then we found out that the trophy was for the first racer cruiser.
Okay. So it's a chicken and egg. Was the rule created for the trophy? I mean, was that the inspiration for it?
The original was to create the rule for the trophy, and then the rule kind of took on a life of its own.
Right.
Interesting.
But the light bulb that said, hey, we should do this. We should do a 50-foot fast boat to Hawaii. It'd be good for the race. It'd give people a little bit of something to build to as opposed to just building all over the map.
Well, and I think at that time also the sleds were also migrating away from their box as it was, and turbo sleds were coming in, and they were looking for a more modern, let's call it a more modernized design, just strictly around a box rule and not around a rating rule.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that was a revolution in itself. Okay, so that's the race. What is going to happen? Let's go to our live 100 nautical mile view. This doesn't have the 4-hour delay. Everybody can get to this. What's going on there? Medusa 0. I've seen that every now and then. I don't know if that's a glitch in the tracker or somebody backing down or
backing down. Yeah. Can you tell me something? We never could figure it out.
Yeah.
The tracker, is that instantaneous, or is the tracker 1-hour averages, or how does that work?
It's snapshots, I believe.
Instantaneous.
I think
that's what we thought.
1-hour snapshots.
Yeah.
Because if it was 1-hour snapshots, there was some very funky wind out there.
Well,
and then a 4-hour delay on top of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
And then in this 100-mile view, these are these on the hour? Yeah. So it gives you the local time. But I know there's another way. to also get this in 20-minute slices or 10-minute slices. So
anyway,
so these are the guys that are still out here now. There's T. Draconis, that's the XP44, Rapid Transit, and it looks like just coming in now. So did you recall what generation this TP52 is, the Kinetic?
I don't know. It's
a Canadian boat. It's a Reichel Pew design. It's a
Gen 1, Gen 2?
Second generation Med Cup, so fourth generation TP.
So maybe you guys can talk about this a little bit. One of the things with high-performance boats is certainly the evolution in design is amazing. The latest Pack 52 and the Invisible Hand and the Bad Pack, they've been tied up here for over a day. And generation 1 or 2, whatever Kinetic is almost a day later. I mean, that's a significant amount of time. Now, you can argue, you know, hardware, software, and so on, but it's pretty remarkable that a boat designed almost around the same parameters has that huge difference on the same course.
I think you'd have to spend some real time on both the difference in the boats and the stories on the condition they were in.
Sure.
Because it's
as well as the condition of the boat and the program and all the rest of it. It's almost impossible. That's one of the things that's great about sailboat racing is you can sailboat race to whatever level you want, and you know you can have a Transpac 52 that's an older boat and have a hell of a lot of fun and come and do these races and compete against the other boats that you know you're going to be at the same speed as, or you can if you have the wherewithal, you can be a giant killer, punch above your weight, and have your TP52, which finishes a day ahead of all the sleds, you know. And honestly, I think it's impossible to say why that one is so much different in pace, you know. It's certainly not probably the crew work. You know, those guys are pushing as hard as anybody else, but, you know, there's a lot of differences. There's any number of things.
Well, and that's why maybe it's dangerous to make assumptions about boat type when you're looking at races like this.
That, and you also have a year where the wind's dying behind.
Yes.
So you get a little bit behind, and then everything gets worse.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And
absolutely.
We just have been seeing that all through.
Because I think here, let's see, we don't have the corrected time option with this view in the tracker. I think you need to go to the big view. But if we go to this and go, this is the scratch sheet, and we've got enough boats finished now. We might be able to start to look at results and see if there's any trends coming out. But I think, and this is listed in order of corrected time. So these are our corrected time winners, both in each class and then overall. So we were chatting earlier about this, is the two newest boats in the fleet are also not only winning their class, they're winning overall.
Yeah, that's true. You know, and I argued against using the rating rule and rating all the boats and saying this is your elapsed time or your corrected time winner, and that's the overall winner. I would prefer to see the boat that wins by the biggest margin in the most competitive fleet, as determined with some sort of formula, which everyone can argue about forever. But saying that, you'd be hard pressed to find. Well, I don't know. I think that the Division I fleet is pretty competitive. Mm-hmm. You know, I think if you were to take the Division I and Division II fleet and combine them, then you would know what the most competitive class in this race is, and whoever won that class would probably be easily able to be crowned the overall winner. Mm. But that doesn't really give that much opportunity to the other boats, you know. So I think it's interesting.
Well, the podium finishers right now, if this were over, and I think it almost is over, to be honest, because the guys that are out there still
out there saving their time.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 are the two new Pack 52s, and then 3 is Chris Hemmons with Varuna. Now, Chris, I think, sailed the boat very well. He knows the race. He knows his boat. They had good navigation, you know, and seems to be a reasonable result.
Absolutely, and it's interesting to see that it's not the big boats who are winning the overall this year.
Yes. Well, and actually the last 2 cycles, the little guys were winning.
But it's fast boats. It's high-rating boats that are doing well.
Right. Fast
Which
boats.
is nice to see, actually, because nobody wants to sail an IOR boat, do they?
Not anymore. And then 4th, J125. So Tim Fuller, who just finished this morning, in fact. in fourth overall. So
yeah.
it's
and it's a very wide, it's a huge variance in boat type as well. The J125 is a very narrow VMG running boat, almost like Bill Lee's boats, and Varuna is a fairly typical IRC racer cruiser. And then the two TP52 clones, if you want to call it that, are the highest performance Grand Prix design that you can build at this stage. So you have a huge variety in the top four, which is what you'd like to see if your rating wheel is working correctly. It's got to be the guys that have sailed the best, not necessarily the ones who have the newest hardware or hardware which is type formed in one direction.
Bill, I'll also, since you're one of the original founders of the TP52 rule, can you comment on the trend that the Pac 52s are in their design parameters are actually coming back toward offshore capabilities versus the trends that the guys in the Med have done?
Well, I think that's a good point because it was conceived of as a Transpac project. We put a lot of wording in there of seaworthy boat,
headroom, and some minimal.
We didn't do that, but we did have a headroom,
right.
And then the boat has to be watertight. It has to meet the structural standards. We put all that stuff in there.
Absolutely.
And then as the guys started having fun buoys racing them, they started trying to skimp around that. And then who's there?
In fact, Rob Weiland.
Rob Weiland, and he keeps trying to draw it back, and he sends them through Germeister Lloyd's and all of that. But
in fact, I was the boat captain for the Spanish Navy's boat the first Med Cup season. And it was very interesting because we had FAR design boats. Three of the boats were FAR design boats, sister ships, which were half a generation ahead of the last generation that was built in this country. They didn't have any deck penetrations. They were completely watertight. They were stiff boats. All the lead was in the keel, not in the bilge. You could take them offshore and you could beat them within an inch of their life, and you could go do any race you wanted, and they were great. They were wonderful boats. And we got beaten badly constantly by boats which had sailmaker's thimbles glued into the deck with a strap of Dyneema tied into the longitudinal in the floor of the boat with water pouring in for the staysail, and that was the Mediterranean style, and that's what they did. And we put our arms up and said, hey, this isn't within the rules, and they said, well, yeah, it is, it's okay. And so that's a totally different perspective. And I think one of the things that's very good about Rob is he's always thinking towards the future, and Rob has been project managing race boats for many, many years, the build and design thereof, and he's always worried about resale value. And these TP52s, the more that he can get them into a mode where you can take them and you can go do the Transpac or the Bermuda race with them, the much more likely they are to be able to sell them and have these owners build new ones to keep doing the Med Cup.
That's right.
Super serious.
Last point, if I may, is just looking here at the multi-hulls. Ryan, you said you saw that race kind of shaping up to be a tactical one. But my question to you earlier, maybe some of our audience has this, which is why is an Orma 60 faster than a Mod 70?
A 15-year-old boat versus a 5-year-old boat. Yeah, I mean, it's very, very simple. The Orma 60 was a prototype rule. It wasn't a one-design boat. The Mod 70 was built to withstand 10 years of one-design racing. It has a lot of carbon in it. It's a little bit narrower to get it into ports more easily. It's very, very stiff, so that you can't hurt it, just like an older generation TP52 would be. Whereas the Orma 60 is a very fragile boat. It's a very high power to weight ratio prototype. And Orma 60 is wider, lighter, and has more sail area than a Mod 70. It's a very simple matter of mathematics to understand that through the water it's going to be quicker.
Bill, future of Transpac and these boats, as we get into foiling appendages and lift, almost like what we saw in the Vendée Globe. I mean, those foils on those boats were generating, I think the figure was 4.5 tons of lift, and the boat's going 3 knots faster. Where do you see that going?
For a long time in the multi-hulls, the foils have been kind of lifting 50% of the weight of the boat. And of course, the holy grail now is to lift the whole boat and have it be stable and work and all that stuff. I think the future has 2 branches, because the most extreme boats have reached a point where mere mortals can't sail on them.
Except Brian.
It's got to be really, really good people in good condition that know what they're doing, that are willing to go do a bumpy ride. And so there's a whole branch of Transpac down in the Aloha class in the sleds of boats that mere mortals can sail. And I think that group will continue very strong. I think the experimentation and going faster and faster is also going to be strong for Transpac. There's going to be some rating questions, some putting classes together questions. But I think you're going to see both groups flourish. And I just call them the boats that mere mortals can sail and the boats that mere mortals don't want to be on for that long.
Right. Do you think it's worthwhile for Transpac to look around the world and say, hey, we're going to have like an IMOCA 60 type, almost, again, like these box rules to encourage development?
I don't know that Transpac would try to do that. I think the development in the foiling boats is so fast now that any box rule would be a 6-month snapshot in time before it was obsoleted.
Right. Okay, very good. Well, listen, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and your expertise today, and thanks to our audience for tuning in for this edition of the Transpac Analysis Show. I'm Dobbs Davis signing off for now, and we'll look forward to having another edition of our analysis show tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Well, that's very easy.